Hey everyone, today we are going to be talking with one of the coolest guys out there ever. I mean, JP Sears, he's a YouTuber, comedian, emotional healing coach, author, speaker, world traveler, and curious student of life. I like that. His work empowers people to live more meaningful lives. He's the author of How to Be Ultra Spiritual. I love the ultra spiritual dude. He's very active with his online videos where he encourages healing and growth through his humorous and entertainingly informative videos, including his hit Ultra Spiritual comedy series, which have accumulated only like 300 million views. So and before we get into too much, I have to tell you like a couple of my favorite ones. And the one I got introduced to was the If Meat Eaters Acted Like Vegans. I have never laughed so freaking hard in my life.
I love that.
Funniest thing ever. And then like recently you did a what spiritual people are like during quarantine. And I'm like, I know all these people.
I might be some of these people. Depends on the day.
I think I might be some of those people too.
It's exactly it. And I was just, especially during quarantine, you had some really fun ones come out during that quarantine time. And I was like, oh my gosh.
It was so needed. Good. Oh my word. We needed it in the world. It was perfect timing.
Thank you for being dysfunctional enough to laugh with me. And yeah, you know, the videos during quarantine, that was part of my self-therapy. It's how was dealing with this stress in a positive way of having life as I know it disrupted. And so I appreciate you and some others around the world being able to connect in on a shared experience we were all going through together.
Yeah.
Because it was the entire world. I mean,
yeah,
the entire world. And so, yeah, we're grateful.
It was crazy.
Right along with you.
We were. So I guess I'm curious to know, like, how did COVID affect your business? Because you are like a YouTuber and stuff, but I don't know anyone who wasn't affected at all. So how did that affect you and what you do?
Yeah, so there was a major effect. I don't know how many, but countless comedy shows canceled because, you know, when I'm not on YouTube, I'm on the stage touring the country doing my live stand-up comedy shows. So I had, you know, many shows canceled or postponed. And, you know, it's weird. I started off at the end of last year. I realized my business isn't diversified enough for me. I've got too much of my income coming from the comedy shows, the live shows. Not that it's like I want to reduce that income. Like, no, I want to keep that, but grow other. Yeah, let's diversify. And of course, like who would have predicted the whole COVID? Nothing like this has ever happened in my lifetime. So, you know, there was a major effect. Yet from the outset, I feel grateful that I had a positive mindset, not delusionally optimistic, but positively realistic, where I looked at this and said, okay, I can look for the catastrophe or I can look for the opportunity. I'm going to find whichever I'm looking for. We always get what we focus on. There's catastrophes there to focus on and energize, or there's opportunities. So, I chose the opportunities. So, you know, there were things I implemented that I never would have thought of if I didn't have the pressure of like, I got to put food on the table. And like now that we're, you know, for the most part on the other side of the quarantine, those things I discovered, I'm going to keep them in my business. So for instance, I did a live stream comedy show every Friday night of the quarantine. I call them Friday Night Still Alive. And I'm not going to do those every single Friday forever, but like did them every Friday during the quarantine. And I learned like, wow, this is fun. And I like, there's new levels of creativity coming out that don't come out on stage when I'm doing like traditional stand-up. The creativity like this doesn't come out when I'm doing my normal YouTube videos. So I'll do these live stream comedy shows from time to time. And I also found really like new, unique ways to get sponsors in for my YouTube videos. So necessity is the mother of invention, as someone says who likes to use
somebody smart said that
as metaphors.
Absolutely.
Man, yeah. It's a stressful time, yet I'm grateful for the ideas that came to me, and of course the courage to implement new ideas.
I love that it kind of gave us a reset. You had to step back. We weren't allowed to do anything else, right? You have to step back, and then what do I want to bring back into my life? What do I want to keep that I've learned? And how does that look later? Because there's a lot of things that were just fluff that I let go. And I don't miss it at all, but it was part of the grind, and you just feel like you had to do it. And it's been the coolest to be able to just really decide what you want to come back into your life.
Yeah. You said that we all have these choices, right? Bad stuff happens and we have a choice, are we going to look for the opportunity or are we going to look for the yucky stuff? Did you stay in the yucky stuff for a minute before you decided to do the choice? Because I know I did. I was like 2 weeks of the world's ending. It sucks. And then I was like, okay, Julie, put your big girl panties on. We got to actually live through things and do the next piece.
Well, and we had each other too. So
yeah.
Well, I love the question. I am a super dysfunctional person. Yet my experience was, I wasn't, different than you, Julie. I wasn't stuck initially in the yucky stuff, but I would visit the yucky stuff for periods of time, like going to bed at night, like, okay, like now some stressful thoughts are hitting me. So, but just through whoever's looking out after me, maybe it's myself, I wasn't stuck exclusively for a period of time in the swamp, but I would go back and visit the swamp. I mean, for me, it was a wave. And, especially the first 2 to 3 weeks of it, it was such a tumultuous time of highs and lows and so many unknowns, which can be an unknown can be either the scariest or the most rewarding thing for a person to encounter, and usually both, if we are willing to encounter it. Anyway, I think, and I'll also share this, shortly into the quarantine, I learned that my wife is pregnant, which feels like such a blessing. We're trying for a child, and he's our first child. So there was, I think, a new protector energy that came out of me where it's kind of like, hey, I'm cool if my wife is stressed out. Like, I want to support her. Like, you got space for your emotions, but like this new version of a man, a father came out of me. It's like, my tribe's hungry. I got to go hunting.
I love that.
That's super cool. That was an interesting time then to have all of that happen because, doctors' offices are closed, like everything is closed. You can't. Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, I love hearing about that new energy coming out too. Yeah. My dog wants to come in and out and in and out.
I have 3 incredibly demanding dogs myself, and I'm hoping that Wally doesn't chime in and express his exquisite level of public speaking that's pretty well eardrum piercing.
Yes. I'm like, usually she's good and she just goes under the desk and she just lays there. Today we're going with in and out.
Which, just real quick on that note, something I find humorous is, so many meetings and like awesome events like this have happened via Zoom. We get to see a little bit behind the scenes, like, it's hard. Nobody can have their professional front on, though some people show up trying, but like you and I are hoping our dogs don't ruin this. And, half the time people don't have pants on during these meetings, and, kids interrupting and like people screaming at each other, not knowing.
Door slamming.
I've loved
you do get to see like what it really is like. And that's been refreshing for me.
Yeah.
The Today shows, and I mean, just all the shows, you see these people and you barely recognize them because they're at home. They're in their normal dress and haven't had the makeup people there.
I know.
So it's cool. Like, I love that part.
Yeah, there has been cool things with
Being
that.
authentic is the coolest. So
I'm going to roll off of that being authentic, and we're going to kind of go toward earlier in your career. And I would love to know, like, at what point this ultra spiritual character kind of came into being. Because I know you did videos before that were just, informational and whatever, and we're healing and we're good. And then all of a sudden there was kind of like this inception of the ultra spiritual character and these just more satirical videos that are like hilarious. So I want to hear about like what inspired that, and did you know it was going to be as big as it turned out to be?
Yeah, no, I was clueless. I'm still clueless. No idea where I'm going, trying to Forrest Gump my way along. Yet the more I follow my heart, the more things work out. But the weird thing about following the heart, as I understand it from my experience, our heart only guides us to the next step. It doesn't give us a mental preview of like, okay, but then like 20 steps from now, where is this leading? What will that be like? No, we're walking into a mystery. It's the uncertainty. So the ultra spiritual character in my comedy videos were born on October 5th, 2014. That's the date I published my first one. Now, leading up to that, I had been doing life coaching for 13 years prior and teaching workshops and leading events around the world on awesome like self-growth stuff. It was amazing, very rewarding work. But during that time, I was putting my authenticity in the closet. I was telling myself it would be a bad idea to let my sense of humor out publicly and professionally. It would discredit me. Like, I'm supposed to be a serious, sincere life coach. And there is a very sincere part of me who's out to help people and just connect heart to heart. And there's a inner child who's got a very well-developed sense of humor. But I was throwing that inner child in the basement and basically saying, it's not okay for you to come out while I'm working. You're defective enough. You'll screw things up for me. I mean, in hindsight, that's the energy of it. Yeah. But I kept having these ideas come to me leading up to October 5th, 2014, which involved me sharing my perspective through the language of comedy. And the first only idea at that time was my first video called How to Be Ultra Spiritual, where I'm basically shining the light on the egotistical nature that can infiltrate spiritual practices, yet hide behind the spiritual practices so the ego can remain unchecked, because that's what I had been doing for so long. So I kept telling myself, no, dumb idea, bad idea. It'd be bad for business. Don't make that video. Nobody would think it's funny anyway. And even worse if they thought it would be, if they did think it was funny, that would be even more discrediting. But the ideas kept coming to me. It's like, I mean, metaphorically, it was very much like giving birth. The contractions are coming. The baby's coming, whether you like it or not. The more I would resist it, the more I'd suffer. But the more I kind of, okay, let's push this out. That felt good. So that video, it took off pretty quickly. And more importantly, something took off inside of me. And looking back, I can say there was a rite of passage inside of me that I went through, which was me becoming more willing to risk being even more authentic, where it's just not playing it safe, being only sincere, JP. It's like, okay, that's part of me. That's not all of me. So the authenticity was merging the sincere with the satirical, the comedian, and saying yes to that, which was scary. Of course, I thought my world would kind of fall apart. I didn't know my world would do the opposite and just expand and get way better. And the last, which by the way, that taught me not to believe everything I think.
Yes.
I think believing what we think is one of the worst ideas. It just limits us. I think it's a great idea to have beliefs, like you're human, you need them. Have beliefs that serve you, But the more we believe our own beliefs, the more we're limiting ourselves, and we won't let ourselves go beyond a given belief or practice or value, even once it's expired. It's like when I was in third grade, I wore pants that fit me. But if I didn't let those pants go, they'd be very constricting. And I think it's the same thing with our beliefs. So, and at the time, I had no idea that the videos would create a growth that would transform my world. There was zero plan in place, yet looking back and kind of reverse engineering how that has happened, where, you know, my life has changed in beautiful ways, and the inner fulfillment I get from my work is at the top of that mountain. But reverse engineering it, I could see what happened is the more I was true to my heart, being willing to offend my mind, do what my mind says I shouldn't do, couldn't do, be irresponsible. It's never been done before, but the more I would follow my heart, even though it would offend my mind at times and definitely scare me, the more things would just grow, not to fulfill my dream, but to grow beyond where I've ever let myself dream before.
Yeah, because putting out that first video, you were probably not thinking, oh, I'm sure we'll get 300 million views off of these. I mean, that's like one of those are ridiculous numbers. I don't know that people even like have that maybe in their aspirations.
My 12-year-old does.
Okay, 12-year-old does.
Your 12-year-old's thinks big. I love that. I love the lack of limitation.
She has 28 viewers or subscribers, and she's like, Mom, I'm gonna be something. I'm gonna be a YouTuber.
That's awesome.
You go, girl.
That's right.
You can be whatever you want to be.
So you were talking about how like it just kept coming and you kept feeling it. And what advice would you have for other people who are feeling those things? Because I think our audience is mostly entrepreneurs that we're just out there and building businesses of different varieties. Yeah. But I know for myself, like anytime I have felt those things and gone after it is like freaking scary, but it's also really rewarding. And there's a little bit of risk averseness right now with the world. Like things feel very uncertain. I know with a lot of the people I know, they would have taken risks 5 years ago that now they're like, I don't know if I dare do that. Do you have any like advice for our people who are in that entrepreneurial space, but they're like a little, I'm scared of taking risks that I might have done earlier, but I have a thing in my heart.
Yeah, if you have a thing in your heart that's urging you to do something, even if it feels risky, I would say don't do it. Your heart is always wrong. You might get your feelings hurt, and you might get really happy if you follow it. Now, yeah, you know, I couldn't be more of a fan of following one's heart. I think our heart never will lead us wrong. I think our heart at times will certainly lead us in a different direction than what our mind wants for us. Our heart's not geared with the low vibration of like, let me meet this idiot mind's expectations of how the world's supposed to be and how they're supposed to be in the world. We have so many limiting beliefs in our mind. Thank God our heart functions bigger than that. Mm-hmm. Yet it's scary. And Julie, you mentioned something that reminds me of Joseph Campbell's famous quote: "The cave we fear to enter the most holds the treasure we seek." Mm. So I truly believe the cheat code for success in life, in terms of inner fulfillment and outer expansion, the cheat code is those who are willing to do things that scare them yet feel purposeful, always expand. Those, and Brene Brown, who's one of my favorite authors, she's got a great quote. She says, "He or she who's willing to be the most uncomfortable is not only the bravest, but rises the highest." Mm. Nobody we admire endorses making yourself comfortable. They are all saying in their own words, be uncomfortable. and they'll say, look at who you admire the most, and they'll have a story that says, how I've achieved this is I was willing to go into the cave that I fear most, not just once, but over and over and over. Growth, happiness, success, fulfillment, it's usually not inside our comfort zone. And a note of realism, that doesn't mean we need to spend 24 hours of our day outside of our comfort zone. I mean, we need to be highly medicated. If we did that, it'd be so anxious.
Yeah, no kidding.
But going outside of our comfort zone every day, whether it's for 5 minutes, an hour, I mean, so many people who do public speaking, you got to think, what were your first 10 speeches like? Like, how uncomfortable were those compared to 2 years down the line, 10 years down the line? But if you didn't keep going into the cave that was so scary, you're standing on stage, your physiology swears you might die, but you went there anyway. So I like to create the distinction when we do things that scare us, but also feel purposeful. That's the growth. It's not just do things that scare you.
No.
It's like, hey, get in a cage with a tiger. That'd be scary, but I don't recommend it. There's probably not going to be a purpose. But even if there's just a drop of purpose or inspiration in what might seem like a whole lake of fear, when there's the purpose there, the inspiration there, we know we got to do it. But here's the problem. It's easier to follow our heart when it's easy to follow our heart. We're living in I would say it's a time of trial where we're being tested. So many of us have walked the path of self-growth, and now life seems to be saying, cool, I'm going to put all that to the test.
You're ready for more?
So I think the most important time to follow our heart is when it's the least easiest to follow our heart. So I think now more than ever, people need to follow their hearts. And it's probably scarier than ever to follow our hearts.
Yeah, I would agree too, because this is kind of how I see it. If you're talking about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, before all of this happened, we were all in that like top of the pyramid. We're in self-actualization and we're doing all these beautiful things and money's good and everything's fine. And then like we all got like knocked down a peg or two.
Survival, food, shelter.
Right underneath.
Like, right? We're like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to get a paycheck next month. It's so much harder to think in those terms. If we're going to use those terms, that self-actualization term, when you're like really more in that safety land, or, you know, those more bottom tiers where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to support my family this month, but like, it's so much easier to take that risk when you're like, things are good and I'm feeling awesome and the world feels like it's supporting me. And like, then when you've kind of gotten knocked down a little bit, like the risk feels a little more real. It feels a little more like, wow, that's what you're gonna do right now.
Well, and I never mind, because it's just us. We might have to edit this part out, but it's hard for me to get too uncomfortable, really, because we dive in all the time. Like okay, let's go. Scary as hell, but yes, we're going.
But I think it's a muscle. Okay, so what do you think about this, JP? Is it a little bit of a muscle thing where like, once you've done that jump a few times, once you've followed your heart and had like a trigger of a reward center for doing it, don't you think there's a little bit of that becomes easier with time?
I 100% think that. I think that, but also I live that as well. So what I'm saying is I agree with you. So I think you're speaking the absolute truth. We need to cancel anybody who disagrees with us. How dare that? I just want to leave negative comments. So of course it's like a muscle. You know, we all can remember a time where we haven't exercised for a while. And maybe we go out and we run a mile, or it's our first day in the gym and like God knows how long. Exercising like that feels like crap. Like you don't feel good right away. You just feel worse.
Yeah.
such as the first time you go into a new discomfort zone, that first time you're on stage speaking, the first time okay, I'm going to start a new business, or I'm going to leave this job or leave this relationship or start something new or have kids. It can be very uncomfortable. However, the body, and I think the body reflects our psychological capacity for it, it is so resilient, it becomes conditioned. Where you look at the person who's winning the Boston Marathon, you're seeing someone highly conditioned. There was a day where they went out to run their first mile for the first time, almost killed them. But we get conditioned. And I'll give you an example. I love to train myself to encounter fear, not just like when it counts the most, like, cool, there's this offer to do something I've never done before. Like I remember when I stand-up comedy, like, JP, we want to create a tour for you. It's like, stand-up comedy, I've never done that before. 0 to 10, it scares me a 10, but it feels purposeful. Yes, go ahead and do that. So, that's kind of like where it counts. But I realize how you and I and everybody, how we do anything is how we do everything. So it's like the athlete on the field, we see them, but what we don't see is behind the scenes when they're in the gym, training, ice baths. So I like to train myself, whether it's cold water in the morning, which is supposed to be super good for your physiology, but I like it just because it's scary. It's so uncomfortable, but that trains me to embrace the discomfort. But the example I was wanting to get to, I live in Austin, Texas, and near downtown, there's just an amazing pedestrian bridge over this natural spring-fed creek. Mm-hmm. And the pedestrian bridge, it's about 25 feet off the water. And I've jumped off high things before and started jumping off that bridge with friends, and it's a thrill. But after, 10 jumps, 15 jumps, 20 jumps, the thrill is much less because of my capacity to handle that experience without being overwhelmed with fear and anxiety. The capacity just goes up. So about 2 months ago, got to up the ante, got to increase the discomfort, my willingness to go there. So backflip off the bridge. Like, oh, it's super scary. Luckily it turned out okay, but that's not even the point. And at the time, that first backflip, it's like a 10 out of 10 fear. And now I was just doing it last night, and it's like maybe a 2 out of 10. So wow. Now it's like, now I got to try a different kind of flip. So
you got to do the triple Indy or, something like that.
The triple Indy, that's an actual flip.
You're talking like
old school or something like that.
I don't know.
Hey.
That might be 3 more lifetimes before I'm doing triple flips off the bridge. But I love your optimism, Robin.
You have to be baby steps. Well, that's something we talk about with our clients all the time. If you're trying to get your brain from this bottom level clear to this ridiculous level, it's going to go, no, we can't. There's too much disconnect there. Yep. We can't go that far.
Yeah.
But we can kind of go here. And then we can go the next step. And then you can go the next step. And that first jump does feel like a pretty big leap out into the universe when you're following your heart and it's something brand new. I remember my first thing, I put together a big personal development conference, right? Super scary. This was 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing in this world. And that was my first jump into doing something. And I was like, oh, it turned out okay. I'm still alive. There'd be 300 people there. Okay, next time, right? And then the next thing and the next thing. But that first one it felt like a pretty good leap. And then I could baby step my way up from that and baby step my way up from that. And occasionally there's still another big leap and another big leap. But, I think if it's too far, there's something in my brain anyway, when it's if the level is just ridiculous. If your first jump was, I've never been diving, I've never jumped off high things. How about we hit that 40 footer? Your brain would be I'm just not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
And we'll do like a triple.
the triple indie.
The triple indie.
Indy. It's so, like it's too much for you to handle at a time. Like,
Yeah.
right. And so,
Right.
okay. So here's a question. How do you know if your goal, your dream, your thing is going to be like one of those, you might really actually hurt yourself because this might be too big of a leap?
Yeah.
Or is it the right amount to grow and stretch yourself?
Yeah, I love that. And if I pretend like I have an answer, like I wish I had like, here's the illuminated answer, excuse me while I levitate on this. But, I think first off, a note of realism, we can never know for sure. I think I would love to. That way it would feel the sense of risk and fear. It was like, okay, if I could know for sure it's going to work out before I start, the fear would go down. Yet obviously having discernment and doing like a pre-flight check, that's wise. Even though we can't know everything, we can at least become much more self-aware. And for me, a distinction to ask ourselves, how we answer it's another question, but to ask ourselves like, okay, this next step I'm doing, is this too big, or is this the next right step? It's just big and scary. We can ask ourselves, what is my heart inspiring me to do? And how much of this is my ego's desire for significance?
I like that.
If we don't ask ourselves the question, we're going to be controlled by our ego's desperate hunger for significance far more of the time. We all have that. It's not going to go away. But if it starts to control us, then we tend to encounter way more rough patches, failures, or God forbid, successes that aren't even in our best interest. They just create a sense of significance for our ego. So yes. I think asking that helps us get out of jail before we lock ourselves into it. It's just a quick example. When I started doing stand-up, my ego said, I should just do theaters around the country. And my agent said, maybe some of those, but we're going to do comedy clubs. Like, well, only hundreds of people can be in a comedy club. With a theater, it can be thousands. Now, in hindsight, comedy clubs was absolutely the best step. And I was grateful at the time I could recognize like, oh, my ego, like it just wants to be super significant. Like I do theaters, that's what I do. So, how we answer that question, we can obviously deceive ourselves. Yet I think we know we're always deceiving ourselves more if we don't ask the question of how much of this next goal is heart inspired versus ego desired for a sense of significance.
I have a question because I love that part. The emotional healing coach. So back when you were doing before Ultra Spiritual, tell me a little bit about that, because a lot of failure and fears, mindset obviously is huge, and we know that that's a space that's helpful as you go forward, and it makes failing a little bit less painful because you can get back up. But emotional healing coach, because I've never heard of an emotional healing coach, a healer, but an emotion healer, and that's what I kind of do. So I'm really interested in what that means and what that looked like.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I just made up the term. It's like, I don't know. It's like,
that's why we haven't heard it.
And I chose that term, I think a term people could better identify with is a life coach. Yet life coaching, it can mean 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people, and different life coaches are working in different realms and depths. So, but what I was doing was helping people help themselves heal old emotional wounds, traumas that were holding them back in life. And by no means was it like, here's my hands and you're healed. I did nothing for people. I was doing my best to empower them to do their own healing. And So a lot of it was inner child work based, and a
yeah.
lot of it is realizing how we function or dysfunction as adults is a symptom of what's unresolved from our childhoods. So when I was in my early 20s, I connected with just a beautiful mentor. He's still a dear friend to this day, a guy named John McMullen, runs an organization called Journeys of Wisdom. And I had been in, at that point, I had gotten into exercise coaching, nutrition coaching. And I thought, well, this guy's coming highly recommended. Let me check out his work and I'll learn something so I can help other people with it. Now, at the time, I was severely emotionally compromised, but the fish swimming in severe emotionally compromised waters didn't know he was swimming in those waters.
Yep. You don't know.
I hadn't cried for like 8 years before that. And I thought that meant I was strong emotionally. But the afternoon of that first workshop, which was December 23rd, 2002, December 3rd, 2002, not that it matters. I was in tears for the first time in 8 years because John is a powerful person, and I really started to get in touch with my need for emotional healing and a vulnerability, not just like in my everyday life, but for the whole backlog of stuff that I swept under my rug without even knowing it. And I think because I developed such a passion and thirst for drinking this in myself, that started to translate to my passion to help other people help themselves with their psychological scar tissue.
I love that. So I also made up a term. I am the joy recovery coach.
Oh,
and I help you recover joy. When we were 4, we had it, you know, and it's all what you're saying. And what we found with entrepreneurs too, you know, personal development absolutely goes hand in hand with entrepreneurship. And that's why I've kind of loved the reset of quarantine, is people have been able to be home. The dads get to be home. And yeah, it drove them crazy being around the kids all day, but they really understood why they were, my husband would call it gathering. I'm hanging out together. What do you need? You know, because it gets us back to those basics of what's important. And there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. None of it was done intentionally to us. We picked it up, patterns, programs that weren't really ours, but you can get past it, and your life and your business. I mean, it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Could you have even imagined back in those days before you went to that first meeting, like what would have happened with your life now?
No, I couldn't. And
your eyes were like, no.
You know, sometimes people ask me, JP, you seem very fulfilled. You love your work. You reach millions of people. Of course, I have my challenges, yet people can see I'm happy and fulfilled a lot of the time. So they'll ask me, are you living your dream? And my answer is no. Like the part of me that dreamt my dream didn't have high enough self-worth to dream a dream this big. So in truth, I'm living beyond my dream. And, you know, I projecting this out onto other people, in a way, like I caution people for following their dreams. Like, follow your dream, but please deviate, because the part of you that dreamt your dream may have been compensating for something. That part of you might have low self-worth, limiting beliefs. So go after your dream, because that gets you moving, but abandon that dream in favor of anything else that calls your heart. Because I think our true dream is something that we haven't encountered yet. It's something maybe it takes our whole life to have the encounter with.
I think that's one of my favorite pieces of advice, like ever.
Yep.
Ever.
We call it pivoting.
Yeah.
You have to, and thank goodness that we have that, because I think back and I'm like, wow, I'm glad that dream didn't come true. You know, like, you know, hindsight's 2020, but
Yeah.
I look back and I'm like, yeah, I'm really glad that I followed inner promptings, my heart, my mind, whatever it is, not my mind, my heart. And I pivoted in the right direction. And I think that's just so important to be able to do.
I agree. I love that. Okay, totally off topic from that. You've been doing Ultra Spiritual for a really long time. Do you ever get into like conversations with people or interviews with this and have people have a hard time taking you seriously because like you have this aspect of you that's, you know, you're in comedy mode and everything is kind of like almost the opposite of what you're saying? Do you have a hard time having people go, no, this is real JP here. Like, I'm not in character. This is what I really mean.
Yeah, yes. But I think they have a hard time. I don't have a hard time with it. I'm amused by it. You know, sometimes if someone's getting to know me, because I have a dry sense of humor, and half the time when I'm saying wacky stuff, I'm not smiling because I think it's funnier that way.
Exactly.
So a lot of times people say like, JP, I don't know when you're being serious or funny. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know either. What do you think? To live with myself. But, you know, and I like that. I first off, I think it's good for people to be confused. We like to think in categories, which means we think we're thinking, but we're not really thinking. And so we like to categorize people like, okay, are you being serious or are you being funny? Well, what if I'm both at the same time? Like create a new category for that in the imprint of your mind. Sorry, you have to think. And, you know, truly sometimes within the same sentence, I'll be serious and funny, yet the meaning of it doesn't go anywhere. So I personally, I get so amused watching when people don't know how to categorize me.
I love that so
Don't
much.
put me in a box. Don't put me in a box.
Pretty much.
You keep that away from me.
It's the best.
Yes, so good.
Okay, as we're wrapping up here, like what is your biggest piece of advice for our people out there? I would say where they're at right now, most of them have been going out and have had their businesses, but like this last COVID quarantine whole situation, or even some of the I don't want to call them riots, but anyway, riots.
Yeah. Well, we had a huge earthquake, which we've never had one that.
Yeah, we're in
before,
Utah and we had a big earthquake. And so that was like, people are emotionally in a weird place and their businesses are in a weird place, but we're starting to kind of, they're coming up out of it. As they come up out of it and are starting to be themselves again, like what's your biggest advice for like starting now, moving forward?
Yeah, you know, so in general terms, I would say this, the best advice I have for right now in this challenging time is it's never been better for business to give value.
Oh.
You know, like when people are desperate, scared, they're in need. And the more value we can give in our own, you know, lanes, whatever the service is, the more we're helping meet their needs. However, the challenge for the entrepreneur is we can be in a time of need. And when we're in a time of need, that's when it's the hardest to give anything, give value in this case. So we can be in a time of wanting to hoard value and just get more from people like Google, like, I'm not going to give that away. Like you need to pay for that. And so that's the temptation. But I think life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. And we're living in a time where it's not easy to give, much like following your heart. It's easy to give when it's easy to give. Right. It's, you know, if you have $100 million in the bank, giving away 1,000, that's easy. What if you have 1,200 in the bank? What's it like to give away 1,000? So, you know, we have a bank of value. And I truly believe being of service to humanity is what we're being called into right now to a greater degree of purification. So giving value. And sometimes there's a direct return in our funnel with, okay, I give this value and here's the ask I have. And other times it's planting a seed. Then other times it's planting a seed that we will never harvest. Someone else will. Other times we do. So that's my greatest piece of advice. And it's not, you're not going to open a business book and find the advice, give value. This I think is written in the book of the human heart. But giving value, I think, is something we all have the capacity to do. And quick disclaimer, that doesn't mean, live like Gandhi and don't charge for anything and like, oh, like I'm not going to receive your money because I just want to give value. It's like, no, now you're not giving value to yourself. You got to receive for sure. Giving it's a circuit, give and receive. And sometimes how we receive that's a little bit of a mystery, yet what we have control over is our ability to give. It just like a quick anecdote. I think it's probably within 5 days of when the quarantine began and job loss was skyrocketing. Nobody knows how much, how long, when's this going to end? Is it going to end? How will people have food? Is there even going to be stimulus checks? And so super scary. And my team came up with the idea of, JP, what if you put together like a 2-hour mini course on, I forgot what we called it, but it's essentially like navigating difficult times. Crappy name I just came up, but it was a playbook for navigating difficult times. And I said, I love that idea and I want to give it away. Like I just want to give that away because like that felt right to just give. And I also decided instead of making one comedy video per week, I want to make 2 per week. I just want to give people more, even if like, okay, another 4 minutes per week. Someone gets some joy, some laughs, some release of like, I can't find toilet paper either. That's a funny video. Thank you. So, I think a question that I would challenge everybody to ask right now is, how can I give more now? And of course, as an entrepreneur, but first and foremost, as a person, look around the people in your house, your neighbors, how can I give more as a person? Because, if we're giving as an entrepreneur, but not giving in our personal life, then we're using giving as a shallow fake strategy because we're only giving on the basis of I'm giving to get something in return, which means we're not authentic with it. But I think to be authentic with it, we have to ask ourselves, how can I give more where I'm at with my family, my friends, my neighbors, and let that same mentality come out in our entrepreneurship? I think that means we're being an aligned, authentic, heart-centered entrepreneur.
I love that. Beautiful, right?
So good. Are we finishing up here?
Yeah.
It's been really fun too. I mean, I love your video. The gluten one is the best. My husband just
has to go gluten-free
now.
now.
Early signs of dementia. Like he'll love that I said that on the video, but he took everything out of his diet and that one gets him through. But you really did, you posted pictures of your family. You let us into your life a little bit. And thank you for doing that. It was really fun to see, because I love Ultra Spiritual. I'm like, I love that you let people in, because we needed to know that the people that we see, the people that give us these things, our humor, the laughs. I almost peed my pants on several videos. I also just said that. And thank you, because it just was a touch that I think really people needed to know that we're all going through this. So thank you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, sister. And Robin and Julie, you guys having me on, letting me come here, swim with your wonderful audience. This has just been an absolute joy.
Thank you so much. And you guys are going to want to follow JP Sears more on YouTube. And where can are you still doing any of your Friday night still alive videos?
And your calendar if you're doing.
Yeah, they'll be
catch you.
scheduled in one-off times. I'm also back to doing some live in-person shows in select locations. So people can check out my website, awakenwithjp.com, to get the latest.
Definitely. You definitely want to follow JP. He cracks me up. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. And there's like 4 or 5 really great nuggets that I'm like,
Yeah.
If all we got today was I'm going to walk away with. I'm sure that's how our audience feels, is if we could walk away with 2 of those really great nuggets, it was worth way more than our time we spent here.
Love
so
that.
thank you so much.
Wally is on cue.
Wally! Dad, it's been an hour.
On cue.
Pretty much. Thank you, ladies, so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you guys.
Thank you, JP.
Appreciate it. Throw that.